All right, chapter 2, part 2. All right, here we go. We're going to go to AKKADIA or Akkad. There's a place called AKKADIA. In fact, I showed you a map where there was Sumerian in purple, and right next to it was Akkad. All right, we're going to look at the victory stele of Naram-Sin. The stele being a flat, large rock with images on it. If we get a closer look at it, now, we have looked at artwork that has registers in it. Like artwork has been organized by registers, and that's not happening in this one. There are clearly multiple levels. It's a vertical image where there's things on top of other things, but it's not organized in registers. At the top, we have a king. I can tell he's a king, but he's wearing the king hat. The king's defeat of the Lullaby, which is a people of Iranian mountains to the east. This guy is the grandson of the Sargon, and he leads his army up the mountain. And as he leads his army up the mountain, the enemies fall and die and beg for mercy. That's pretty badass. So you can see this guy has it looks like a spear in his neck, and he's dying back. And then we have other people that are on the ground as he walks over them. And then down below him, his troops are orderly. Look at, they're all like uniform and similar. They are orderly going up the mountain. The enemy troops are disorderly and falling down the mountain. This is the first time that a king appears as a god in Mesopotamian art. His horned helmet is that of the gods, and that is the symbol that tells us he is a god. Now, if we look at his head in profile, does that mean that the helmet that he's wearing has a horn growing out the front and one out the back? Or is it more likely they're growing out the sides like a bull? So then what we're looking at is a composite view. We're looking at a frontal view of the helmet and a side view of the head. And then up in the sky, there are 3 stars. Can you find the 3rd star? You see this little triangle piece right up here and this little square piece. That means that there was another star up there. These represent a Shamash, the sun god, watching over the battle. So, like I said, there are no registers. This one has registers right here, but this one doesn't have registers. It's a lot more fluid and not as organized, or it's not as rigidly organized. They both tell a story. All right, we're going to move on to the Ziggurat of Ur. The temple at the top no longer survives. But the ziggurat is in quite good shape compared to the other ziggurat that we looked at. This is what it would have looked like in the heyday, or an artist representation of it. I think it might be a bit exaggerated, but totally cool though, I think. Here's a model of what it would look like. Another model. And then Minecraft model, right? That's Minecraft, right? All right. So then we can compare it to the previous one right there, the one on the left. What happened? Like, why does one survive and the other one doesn't? And they think it's because of the increased slope on the walls helped prevent puddles. And then just a fun history fact, when the Iraq war happened and American air power was bombing all kinds of stuff in Saddam's army, he thought it'd be really clever to stash his planes right next to the ziggurat because he knew that the Americans wouldn't bomb the planes because they were so close to a historical site. All right, moving on to Babylon. All right, we're going to look at the stele with the law code of Hammurabi. All right, so let's get a closer look at it. It looks like a giant finger with a nail at the top. These are the written code of laws, and these are penalties for laws that are broken. And if we get closer, they're written all over the stele and on the back. And if we get close, what do we call that style of writing? Looks like cuneiform. Am I wrong? One thing I want to point out is the image that is at the top. And we have King Hammurabi raising his hand in respect to Shamash, the sun god. And Shamash has flames coming out of his shoulders. These strips of bacon right here, all right, are not strips of bacon. They are flames coming out. The king is offering the laws to the god. So with his hand up, that's a sign of respect. Now, the Shamash, or the god, is holding this object right here. It is called the rod and ring. These emblems are the measuring tools. The rod is a measure like a yardstick, and the rope is a measure used in temple building. Sometimes it's described as a coil of measuring string and a yardstick. Other theories that they are the shepherd's crook and nose rope. And this image of the rod and ring pops up all over Mesopotamian art. All right, we have this goddess right here, and she is holding rods and rings. We have other images showing rods and rings. But back to the stele of Hammurabi, that god right there is Shamash, the sun god. Now let's take a look at the code. There's lots of laws in here. This stele is famous for some of the laws that are in there. The most famous being if a man puts out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. So the law or the rule of an eye for an eye comes from the stele of Hammurabi. Here are some other laws. If he kills a man's slave, he shall pay on a third of a mina. All right, these are very specific laws. If someone steals property from a temple, he will be put to death, as will the person who receives the stolen goods. If a man rents his boat and the boat is wrecked, then the renter shall replace the boat with a new one. If a married woman dies before bearing any sons, her dowry shall be repaid to her father. But if she gives birth to sons, the dowry shall belong to them. And if a man's wife is caught in bed with another man, both will be tied up and thrown in the water. All right, they didn't mess around. All right, we're moving on to Hittite art. All right, and we are going to the Middle East or West Asia. And now we're looking for Turkey. Where is Turkey? Turkey is this square or this rectangle shaped country up here. And we're going to go look for Hattusa. And we're going to get into Hattusa. And there are two sides to Hattusa. There's a lower Hattusa and an upper Hattusa. The upper is farther up the hill, and the lower is slanted down the hill. And then we're going to look at the King's Gate. There's a King's Gate on that side. There's a Sphinx Gate in the center. And then there's a Lion's Gate over here. And to get into the King's Gate, you don't just walk up to the gate. you would have to walk around and then go through this almost this gauntlet of walls right here. In a wall, the weakest point of a wall is the gate. And so if you have enemies that are trying to get in through the wall, they're going to try to get in through the gate. And if your gate is somewhere out here, you have a whole bunch of enemies out here and there's nothing you can do about it. But if your gate is right here and you have these walls on either side of people trying to get in the gate, you can have people on top up here throwing spears and rocks down on the people that are trying to get in if you don't want them in. But anyways, as we get a little bit closer, all right, there's this gate right here, and there's a king on each side. And this is what it looks like nowadays. Then we're going to go to the Sphinx Gate, and the opening of the Sphinx Gate would have looked like this then. Now it looks like this. And the Sphinx, you can see, has the head of a human, body of a lion, and the wings of an eagle or a bird. But we're not really here for the King's Gate or the Sphinx Gate. We're here for the Lion Gate. And again, it has this entrance that whereas if you were to try to get in without an invitation, they'll throw rocks down on you from above. Here is what the Lion Gate would have looked like then, and then here's what it looks like now. As we get closer, all right, so the message of the lions and the Sphinx and the kings is that the lions will protect the city. The lions are there to protect the entrance of the city. And there's a theme of animals guarding the gateway. It shows off courage and strength to of the people inside the city, and it intimidates foreigners traveling to the city. It was believed to have had a magical power to protect the city. If enemy came through the gates, the lions would come alive and defeat the enemy. And this gives you a sense of how large the lions are. So what I want you to remember about the lions is they protected the city. All right, we're going to move on to Assyria. All right, we're going to go back to the Middle East, and we are looking for Iraq. Which one is Iraq? That one right there. And we're going to go to the northern area of Iraq, and we're going to look at the Assyrian Fortress Palace. And as we get a little bit closer, I want to point out there's a gate there and there. Right, here's a gate to get into the palace. This is the big palace around here. And then there's another gate to get into the palace. And as we get closer, I want you to pay attention to these entrances right here and here and here. And this is what I want you to be seeing right here, the figure on the far left. Just like the lions in the previous city, they have these magical creatures that guard the entrances to the various parts of the palaces. All right, and what these creatures are, they're called Lamassu, Lamassu. And they are Sargon's monstrous guardians. They have the body of a bull, a man's head, and they are winged. Here's some other images of Lamassu. And they use these creatures to guard entrances like this right here. And here's something interesting I want you to see is from the front, you're seeing both legs forward like this. It's a symbol of strength. He's stopped in front of you, and his legs are frontal. But as you go to the side, you can see that it's walking. And then if you look at it from here, if you were to stand in front of it, you would see it standing still, and then as you pass by it, you see it walking. So there's kind of it changes its stance, and it's kind of interesting. It makes it look like it has 5 legs, but that's not true. You're meant to look at it from the front or the side. All right, now we can all see it. So this is an Assyrian palace. And I want you to notice at the entrances, you'll see the Lamassu. Right here. And that shows how they guarded the palace. And then we go inside, and on these walls are different relief sculptures. And we're going to look at those in just a second. And as we look at these relief sculptures, I just wanted you to get a sense of where these relief sculptures come from. So this is actually a pretty cool video just showing where this art comes from. Here's a couple more Lamassu. I'm going to stop the video there. All right, it gets kind of redundant here, but it gives you an idea of where this stuff comes from. All right. And we're going to begin today with the Assyrian relief sculpture. And this is from that Assyrian palace that I just showed you. A lot of these images are of the military victories and hunting expeditions. And they have a lot more detail than previous civilizations. All right, can you tell what's going on in this image right here? There's people trying to attack the fort. That is correct. We have a fort right here on the right side. You can see the battlements. There's people on the inside of the fort protecting it. Then we have archers over here, and then we have swimmers over here. And I think what they're holding is bags of that are made out of animal skins filled with air so that they can breathe. But they are being shot at. There's arrows in them. They're being shot at by the archers as they get close. Here is another one where King Ashurbanipal is sacking the city of Susa, and the troops are taking away all the goods from the city. And up here, they are dismantling the fortress and taking it apart. We got a close up of. I just wanted to show you the detail that's in here, like the abstracted beard, the curls that are in the beard, and then this hair up here looks like ramen. Or he's got ramen hair up here. But along with all these military victories, scenes of military conquest, is a lot of scenes of hunting, where the emperor or the king is shown as a hunter. And the reason why it's important to show him as a hunter, to show that he is a badass, all right? To show that he is strong, that he has courage. And what is he hunting? Lions. He's hunting lions, all right? So only a badass hunter can hunt badass animals. And so he is on his chariot, and the chariot driver drives him around, and he shoots arrows from his chariot. And then he has soldiers behind him to make sure that he doesn't get harmed. So it's kind of like a safety net that he's in command of all of this right here. And you can see that there's arrows inside the lion. That lion's not having a very good day. Now, I want you to know what a relief sculpture is. All right. So I should have a definition up here, but relief sculpture is sculpture that is carved into a wall or flat surface. Now, these Assyrian reliefs are called low relief. I want you to write that term down, low relief. Low relief, it means it only comes out just a little bit from the wall. A good example of low relief is a quarter. If you have a quarter in your pocket and it has the image of a person on it, that's low relief on it. Who's on the quarter? Is it Washington that's on the quarter? All right. And on the other side, it's an eagle, or whatever state you have, or there's all kinds of Up until 2000, it had just an eagle on the other side. That is low relief. High relief is when it comes out high from the wall or far from the wall. And you can see it becoming high relief right here because the shadows are darker. Whereas this is just barely carved into the wall. This is carved a little bit deeper. Again, there's all this carnage with these lions. These lions are having a very bad day, and it makes me feel sorry for the lions. And one of my favorite images from this palace is this guy right here. This is an Apkallu, Apkallu, and he's standing between two sacred trees. This is a sacred tree, and this is a sacred tree. And he's holding this pine cone looking object right here. That's a Mililu. And he's holding a bucket called an Bandudu. And what he's doing is he's the act of purification. He's showing the king as a purifier. And notice the two knives. He has two knives right here in his shirt. Anyways, I think that's a pretty cool looking creature. And just hanging out, picking pine cones, putting them in his bucket. So then we have the fall of the Assyrian Empire. And the Assyrian Empire was never secure. It was far weaker than anyone realized. They had frequent rebellions. The army did not have the manpower to support the empire. And Assyria disintegrated at the end of Ashurbanipal's rule. And it was invaded by Medes in 612 BC. And what rises out of the Assyrian Empire is the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And they wish to capture the splendor of Babylon. Okay, so we are now going to look at Neo-Babylonian art. So Babylon is pretty much in central Iraq. And we're going to take a look at the kingdom under King Nebuchadnezzar. He was involved in lots of wars, and he put down uprisings and enemy armies. He was portrayed as an oppressive and cruel enemy of the Jewish people. He conquered Judea. He exiled the Jews from the city, and then turned to building in order to create a legacy. And he wanted to make Babylon not just a great city, but legendary. So he restored Babylon to its former glory and then some. This building right here, Etemenanki, is a massive ziggurat in Babylon. And some think this ziggurat was the inspiration for the story of the Tower of Babel. And one of his other projects of Nebuchadnezzar was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. You've heard of that, right? That's one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. Well, the seven wonders, there was the Great Pyramid of Giza, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the temple of Artemis at Ephesus, the lighthouse of Alexandria, the Colossus of Rhodes, and the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So with the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the story goes that Nebuchadnezzar II and his wife, Artemis, or Amytis, she was from Media, a kingdom far away. And she left her home and country, her home country, and moved in to be with Nebuchadnezzar. But notice how flat this area is in Iraq. Her home country is full of mountains and greenery and hills and valleys. And so she got all sad because she missed her homeland. So Nebuchadnezzar constructed a structure with tiers and gardens to imitate the valleys of her homeworld, and the gardens to represent the greenness of her homeland. And water was not only channeled from the Euphrates, but taken up to upper levels to water the plants. And so there's lots of ideas about what the Hanging Gardens of Babylon would have looked like. Anyways, he imported plants from her homeland, and the Greeks that had visited Babylon boasted of its beauty. But there's a problem with this whole story. Archaeologists have never found any proof it ever existed. The earliest mentions about hanging gardens come from 200 years after Nebuchadnezzar died. And there's no written evidence that he ever bragged about. And he bragged about a lot of other things he did. So he would have bragged about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So some people think that the gardens were real, but falsely attributed to Nebuchadnezzar. There was another Mesopotamian king that had built something similar, and he excelled at engineering water systems. So it's possible that the Greeks visiting the area called the whole area Babylon when they were really never in Babylon's in the city proper. With Babylon, it was estimated that it had a population of 200,000, and it was the biggest city on earth at that time. And Nebuchadnezzar's construction projects transformed Babylon into a sort of paradise on earth. And it was the most aesthetically pleasing city in the ancient world. Now, we're going to focus on the 8th city gate of Babylon. So there is this walkway up to the city, and we're going to look at this structure right here. Oh, yeah, there's an arrow right there, and we're going to look at that. And so this is what it would have looked like traveling up to the city. The gates were meant to slap visitors' faces with the might of Nebuchadnezzar. It was meant to awe and impress those passing through the gate. We're talking about the Ishtar Gate now. Now, what color is the gate? Right, it's blue. And they're made of mud brick with a blue glaze on it. That's what gives it its blue color. Now, the Ishtar Gate has been taken apart and reassembled in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. I would imagine they would have numbered them and made a chart. But it's possible. There are castles that have been moved from Europe to America the same way. You take it apart brick by brick, and then you put it back together. Yeah. So we have these creatures that are on the wall of the gate. Can you tell what these creatures are? Yeah, it looks like a horse. I think that's a unicorn up there. And then this right here in the middle is a dragon. And then at the bottom, we have a bull. And then leading up to the gate, we have lions. And these lions represent Ishtar, the goddess of war and wisdom. And they are orderly, like on parade. That shows that they are trained and controlled. And this gives a sense of symmetry. It gives a sense of order. And the ferocious faces are guarding the city. He's saying, "Rawr." All right, and then we have the bulls. Bulls in ancient Mesopotamia are just as ferocious as the lion. They are associated with the god Hadad. And they also represent the fertility of the land and the harvest. And they're not only protecting the city, but they're providing for the city. And then we have these Mesopotamian dragons. where it has the head and neck of a snake, the front paws of a lion, the hind legs of an eagle, and the tail of a scorpion. And the dragon is associated with Marduk, the patron god of the city. And I don't know if you saw was it the Immortals, the movie that came out? There was a lot of art history in the Immortals, and they have a big fight in front of the gate of Ishtar. They're time traveling superheroes, so they can do this kind of thing. All right, now we're going to go to Achaemenid. All right, where is the Middle East in this map? Right, just to the right of Africa, and then we're going to look for Iran. Where is Iran on this map? And then we're going to go to Persepolis. The word Persepolis means the city of Persians, and it's known for its monumental art and architecture. And during the Achaemenid Empire, you can see the borders of the empire. Iran is in this area right here, and their empire went all the way past Egypt into Libya, and it went all the way up into the Greece and Macedonia, and all the way nearly to India. And the two kings are Darius II and Xerxes. Darius II is the father, Xerxes is the son, and we're going to look at Persepolis, the audience hall of Darius and Xerxes. This audience hall is a visual microcosm of the Achaemenid Empire. It has the sculptural decoration shows that the Persian king ruled over all of the subjugated ambassadors and vassals. And in this relief that we're going to look at, all the rulers of the empire are shown bringing an endless tribute to the kings. We're going to look at the Apodana main hall and the hypostyle plan. So this is what it looks like today. And I want you to know what a hypostyle hall is. Write down this term. The building that we're looking at is Egyptian, but it's the same concept. And then this is the building that we're looking at now. A hypostyle hall is a large room, basically something like the size of the commons that we have here at school or a gymnasium. All right, it's about that size, but they didn't have the technology at that time to have it as open space. In order to keep the roof from caving in, you had to use multiple columns and pillars to hold the roof up. So it's a massive hall, but there's also a ton of pillars or columns holding up the roof. Favorite style of what? I do like Ionic, but these things are pretty cool because they have twin bulls on it. The question was, what's my favorite style of column? When we get into the Greek art, we'll see the Ionic.
I like Doric.
Doric. All right, so you're a simple guy. Yeah. All right, so this is what the hall would have looked like at that time, and it's held up by these columns. And so a column is a large cylinder. It is a structural device meant to hold up the roof. And then the top of a column is called a capital. The middle of the column is called the shaft. And then the bottom of the column is called the base. James and I were just having a conversation about columns, and the main difference between the columns that we were discussing was the capitals, right? So I like the Ionic capital, he likes the Doric capital, but basically they're the same column. Anyways, so we can see these double-headed bull capitals on these columns, which I think these things are kind of cool. But we're kind of here to see these relief sculptures. And the relief, so this is a relief sculpture that's been painted here. And we have lions fighting the bulls. And in the center, we have a king, and people are presenting their wares to the king. And you can see here on another part, again, with the lions fighting the bulls. And then you have these soldiers that are facing the middle here. See the relief sculptures. And the subject of the sculpture is conquered people giving their wealth to the king. It is a procession, and it's making the king look more powerful. It shows his authority. So there's this endless procession of other rulers giving their wealth to the king. They're giving him homage. Now, this is the empire right here, and then but Greece is becoming a problem over here. There's Greek colonies on these islands right here, and they're calling back to Greece mainland, and Athens is right here, and they're saying, "Hey, the Persians are being unfair to us. Can you help us out?" So Greece sends troops and ships, and they go and they burn down Sardis. What this does is this makes the Persian king really angry, and so he has to he's going to get his revenge, but revenge isn't going to come right now. So he hires a servant, and his only job is that when he brings the food, tells the king to remember the Athenians, the ones that came and burned down Sardis. Anyways, long story short, eventually the Persians, their army goes around through Macedonia and down, and then they attack Athens. Their fleet, their navy comes and attacks Athens, and during the Greco-Persian Wars, and they burn down Athens in 480 BC. And they finally got the revenge. They burned Athens to the ground 20 years after Persepolis was built. And Persepolis would remain an important site until it was sacked, looted, and burned under Alexander the Great of Macedon in 330 BC. And so this is Athens burning down by the Persians, and then the Greeks eventually get their revenge by burning down the audience hall of Xerxes and Darius. It was raised by Alexander the Great in retaliation for the Persian sack of the Athenian Acropolis, 170 years after the Persepolis was built, and 150 years after Athens burned. All right, are there any questions about anything in I'm going to say my guess would be marble. All right, you don't. What you do is you burn down all the wood that's holding it up, all right, and then you take the marble back home with you. All right, you put it on ships and you take it back home. All right, and that's all right. We're going to come into this term later on. It's called spolia, Spolia. What you're looking at right here is yes, marble doesn't burn, but you can burn the rest of it, and then you can knock over the column and make the roof cave in and knock over walls, and then look at all this wonderful marble here. We can just take it back. So yes, that's what they did with it. That's a good question. Any other questions about Mesopotamia?